an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Morning Star, chapters 60, 61, and 62, Dragon's Maw, The Red, and Omnis Vir Lupus. In these chapters, I got what I wanted. I got it, guys. He's alive! Oh, thank God. I was just... thank God. That's all I got to say. End of episode. Just kidding. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Cassie for commissioning this episode. Cassie's in the chat. What's up? You guys, I can't help but laugh at the fact that, I got what I wanted, but it was a theory that I only started to come up with while I was recording. It's I don't want it to seem like I'm saying, I knew the whole time. I did not. And it wasn't until I was talking about it on air that I started to be like, wait, maybe this other thing, And I'm just really relieved that it's true, because I was feeling like I was so conflicted. As I said in that episode, I was like, am I going to feel a bit of a way if this is done? If it is a plan and Sevro is okay? But I decided it was too much of a loss. Losing Sevro, it would be too awful. And I was not going to be mad if we did a take backsies. I just couldn't find it in myself to be that cold-blooded about the whole thing. So maybe that's, me being a little bit of a wuss, a chicken. Maybe I'm too emotional. I don't know, but I can't help but enjoy a happy ending for something that has otherwise been so bleak so much of the time. This is not like, say, Ron in Harry Potter, who, I have always sort of felt like Ron should have died. It seemed pretty clear to me in the way the story was written that this was something that had occurred to the author and almost been followed through with, but not quite. And that was different because so much of Harry Potter had been people managing to mostly our faves would be okay. But this series, there have been so many losses. There has been torture. There has been such betrayal and bloodthirst and cruelty that my main character was directly involved in. It wasn't just stuff happening around him. It was happening to him. And I just cannot begrudge deciding to let him out of it a little bit. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. And I really am curious, if you guys had moments where you sort of saw it coming, that this was part of a plan. Also, I wasn't really keeping track of where we were in the story. And that's another part of it that I feel I might have been more certain that it was all part of a plan if I had realized how close to the end we were, and that in terms of story arcs, that would make the most sense. And I'm glad that I hadn't kept track of that, so that I was much more uncertain about the whole thing. So with that said, and when I say a happy ending, I just want to really make it clear for now, this doesn't end here in a way that I still think, since this is the last in the trilogy, that we're getting a happy ending, but there is still possibility for more loss. So we shall see. So we pick up chapter 60 is right after Darrow's hand has been cut off. I really hope that we get a moment where Cassius is like, hey, I'm sorry that I had to cut your hand off. Like, knowing that it was all part of a plan, it doesn't mean that Cassie's wanted to do that. And I admire the fact that he fucking went for it, you know? I really... he needed to be able to follow through on this in order to prove whose side he was on. And I won't say that he was like unflinching exactly. That's too strong. But, you know, it was believable. And yet, knowing that like this person is actually your ally, I have to assume that when they talked about this plan, you know, you remember how I mentioned like the moment earlier when Mustang brings up a plan and they spend some time sitting around laughing and talking about all of the things that could go wrong. I don't know if something like this came up. And I am very curious about it. Like, were they aware the kind of damage they would take? I have to assume they were, because he's been in it already as much as one can be in it, you know? That was serious. So I have to assume that the eventuality of like a very, very serious injury was something that was on his mind and that he was fully aware of being a possibility. I also have to assume that they agreed with Cassius, like, you are going to have to make it look good. And so whatever they ask you to do, you're going to have to do it. But I can't help but think about what if they hadn't had time to like talk through it all. And then they were faced with this moment and Cassius is just like, oh, fuck, you know? So, Cassie says, I did not see it coming the first time, but there were signs on rereads where Sevro gets all woozy and weird before it all goes down. I mean, now they're even, Darrow plus Cassius. Ashley says, I did not see it coming. Oh, you're right. I forgot about that, Cassie. Yeah, they're even now, huh? Ashley says, I did not see it coming, but I had been waiting a year for Morningstar after the cliffhanger at the end of Golden Sun. I inhaled the book too fast on the initial read-through to see the signs. That's kind of... like, I am reading it fairly slowly, and I, like I said, still didn't really put the signs together until I was actually recording and talking through it. So I think it's quite a satisfying reveal in that you have enough signs that you could figure it out if you decided to slow down and do that, but it isn't the kind of reveal that, like, requires so much explaining after the fact that it almost feels like, did you just like decide it was going to be a twist and then you had to work out how it could have possibly, you know, like shaken out this way? Because there are some times, and I don't want to name any names, but there are times where we get twists and it really feels like this was not thought out. This was not something that like was planned ahead of time, and it feels janky. This is very, and it's the same as like the end of book 2, where I was worried going and like something felt wrong, but I wasn't prepared for the scope of the whole thing. So we drive toward the cauldron of clouds that swirls around the highest skyscrapers. Beneath the cloud layer, the interlocked skin of cityscape is quiet, dark in anticipation of orbital bombardment, except for the veins of flame that bleed across the horizon from riots in Lost City. We taxi onto a circular landing pad atop the Sovereign's spire. There, Aja and a cohort of Praetorians meet us. Cassius comes out manhandling me along. He drags Sevro with his other hand like a deer carcass. I can't help but wonder if Sevro's going to be like, the fuck are these scrapes down my side? Like, I think he's got, like maybe some armor or something on, so it's not going to leave but like he really has been put through it in the midst of all of this. So they have to get on an elevator, grav lift, and they are brought a kilometer beneath the surface of the moon. Wild. I wonder if Fitchner knew its inner workings. Seems a secret Aja would hoard, but I wonder if she even knows all the secrets of this place. Tunnels to the left and right of the narrow hole we passed through are long ago collapsed, and I can't help but wonder who once walked through them, who collapsed them, and why. And this was something as well that was a little bit of a hint for me. The fact that the technology is older than the Citadel from a time when Earth stood the only enemy Luna knew. And for me, I was like, okay, this actually would really work well if they knew about this. I can't tell if they were aware of where they'd be taken, but the fact that the tech is so old and that they're in a place where contact might be difficult, that works to their advantage eventually. Synced blues and greens lying back in tech beds, IVs hooked into their bodies as data streams through their brains via uplink nodes embedded in their skulls, eyes lost to some distant plane. These are... It says it's the central nervous system of the society. Octavia can wage a war from here even if the moon falls to ruin around her. What? It's the central nervous system of the society. But how? I didn't feel like this was explained adequately. Do you guys have like... am I alone in that? I'm really curious whether y'all were able to like pull an explanation from this, or if there was some earlier information that would make more sense. And I'm very prepared to be like, okay, I just missed that. But it was said in such a sort of like, well, this is the thing that we've talked about kind of way. And I was not familiar with this, like, I don't know how to call the setup, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So her patrician voice echoes down the hall. Janus, who cares about civilian casualties? Does the sea ever run out of salt? If they manage an iron rain, you shoot them down, whatever the cost. The last thing we desire is for the Obsidian Horde to land here and link with the riots in Lost City. This is the one moment in these chapters that I couldn't help but kind of laugh at. Because it is such a thing with when you're dealing with like a baddie, that if they are in the midst of a conversation with one of their cohorts, you walk in just as that baddie is saying to somebody else, I don't care about the children. I don't care about the old people. Kill them all. Like, it's just so rote. It's such a trope that you just happen to walk in at a moment when they are saying something particularly cold-blooded. And it almost made me wonder if she was setting them up. That was how much I was sort of eye-rolling at this line. This author does not fall into this kind of trap very often at all. So I'm not trying to hold this against him. He has enough goodwill from me that I'm just like, yeah, okay, fine. I'll let it go. But there was like I think a cartoon that I was watching, and the baddie is doing this when they walk in on that, and I was just sort of like, yeah, see, yeah, this isn't, come on, you could do better than this. The ruler of all I've ever fought against stands in a depressed circle at the center of a large gray and black room bathed in blue light from the praetors and ashlord who surround her in holographic form. There's more than 40 in a semicircle, the veterans of her wars. Pitiless creatures watching me enter the room with the dark, smug contentment of cathedral statues, as if they always knew it would come to this. As if they earned this end of mine and didn't luck into it just as they lucked into their birth. And all I could think here was there's like one of the Marvel movies. There is the whole meeting between, you know, the Hydra representatives. And that was really what I was picturing here. So they're all arguing about how to handle some things. Ultimately, this is not super important yet. I am not going to get into the details and read all of the exact, you know, dialogue from this scene. Two Olympic knights greet Cassius quietly as we entered, so as not to disturb the sovereign in her debriefing, though she's noted my presence with an emotionless glance. I was a little surprised that there's no real reaction from her, and I suppose the fact that they have captured him, that's when the reaction would really show on her, and she would, you know, take a moment to be like, I cannot believe the fucking luck we had. Amazing, you know? And by the time they actually walk in here, she's able to have this a little bit more under control, because really, as much as there may not be a necessity at this time, it really does seem that one of the biggest lessons when you are working in politics in general, but in this kind of political environment particularly, keeping your feelings off your face is kind of key. Being able to, it's control, right? Like that's one of the things that came from the first chapters of this book, is establishing the control you have over your own emotions, your own body. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that she doesn't. I just kind of expected some gleefulness on her face, you know, something that sort of indicated that she was gloating. And yeah, we just don't really get it. Not yet. So, Augustus too, don't you have all the luck? And Aja bagged the obsidian. Fear and love are going to get Victra. He says fear and love. Who is that? Because they're capitalized. I'd kill to snag Victra, Truth says, walking around me. That'd be a dance. Say, didn't you bed her, Cassius? I never kiss and tell. How do we fare? Better than Fabii. They're tenacious, hard to pin down. Keep trying to close so they can use their obsidian, but the Ash Lord's keeping them at a distance. The Archgovernor's fleet will be the hammer that wins this. They're already coming around their flank, see? You could always join, order a shuttle. That would take hours. We've 4 nights in engagement already. Someone has to protect Octavia, and my ships are being held in reserve protecting the day side. This was when I really started to be quite confident of my theory, because Cassius encouraging them to leave felt very suspicious. It wasn't like a real heavy-handed suggestion. It wasn't like he was being obvious, but it definitely was like, okay, that's just, I already have a tendency to think in a certain direction. And then cards on the table. Oh, they're Olympic Knights and that's what they go by. Right. Thank you. But cards on the table. The other thing that happened here was I suddenly remembered Darrow giving a hologram. What do they call it? Holocube? I don't even remember what it's called, but he gives Cassius something to watch, and then we leave and don't get to see the way that, you know, that shakes out. And I remembered that here, and once that came to mind, because you guys know, like, when I was theorizing whether or not this was all part of a plan in the last episode, I kept trying to think how this could be a part of a plan if Cassius were actually, you know, shooting Sevro, were actually trying to fuck them. And it wasn't until I really recalled the fact that we didn't see whatever it was that he saw. And that turned the whole corner of like, oh, what if it's not like him being an enemy that they have tricked into something? He's in on this whole thing along with them. And then that shifted my whole brain. And I went, okay, I see what's going on here. Like, it was just a combination of a couple things that I had sort of forgotten falling into place. I do have to laugh, though. Like, the thing with Mustang tells us her plan, and we all have a good laugh as we talk about the ways that it could go wrong. It's just enough of a mention that you note it, but it's handled in such a casual, offhanded way that it's very easy to simply dismiss it and forget it. So he kind of hits like the perfect mark there in terms of, I'm going to mention this so that you can't say I didn't, but I'm going to make it seem like something you really do not need to be worried about. And I think that was done very well. That's a difficult line to walk, you know? So yeah, the Ash Lord, is they're talking about the fact that like the enemy is brave and that they're, you know, going down fighting. And Darrow is thinking to himself about how much Roke actually did care about casualties and cared about like the history of the ships and everything. And Darrow refers to the Ash Lord as thuggish, which I do really like. Damn their heritage, damn the lives, damn the expense. He's a destroyer. And that makes sense if you are the Ash Lord, I feel like. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean, but I feel like it is, I burn everything to ash. I make sure that, you know, it's all sort of, there's nothing remaining by the time I'm done with it. And it may have a completely different meaning, but I'll be honest, I don't really feel like we get a great overview of what all of the Olympic Knights are and exactly how they get selected and what they represent. I'm sure that it's been sort of mentioned before, but I didn't, whatever it was, it didn't like embed itself in my brain. And ultimately, I don't really think it's like that important, to be honest. It maybe in the next trilogy that she did or whatever it is, it will be. But at this point, I'm not even like really mad about it. It's almost, there's a part of me that kind of likes that it hasn't been fully explained because it makes the world feel really big. And like, there's so much to tell me that he's only giving me what's really strictly necessary. And it's not always going to be required that I know everything. So if it wasn't explained, I'm not mad about it, is what I'm saying. So the Sovereign turns to look at her morning knight and extends her arms as if greeting a long-lost child. Cassius. She embraces him after he bows, kissing his forehead with the same familiarity she once had for Mustang. My heart broke when I heard what happened on the ice. I thought you were slain. Really, the Sovereign is a piece of work, you guys. I understand fully that needs must, that in politics you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, in ruling, in war. But the kind of liar she is beyond my ability to like fully understand. Rashawn and I were talking about this in a recent episode. I think it might have been the House of the Dragon episode, of just like what it takes to be a good liar. And Rashawn says that she just can't do it. You know, she really is such a bad liar that if she ever attempts it, it's really immediately obvious that she's full of shit. And it's sort of like people will agree to believe her in a way that very much is like, we know you're lying, but okay, we'll just let it go. I am in a different sort of, like, I can lie really convincingly, but it takes so much effort for me to be willing to do that. Like, the circumstances have to be dire for me to be interested in coming up with a lie and using the energy to act, to be convincing in the lie. And then afterward, you have to sustain that lie, remember it, and possibly come up with additional lies to support it. That is a lot of work. And, you know, I feel like I used to be able to pull off lying a lot more because I didn't really know who I was yet. And I was willing to, like, put that energy in because it was sort of like a fun experimentation to see how much I could lie. How much can I get away with? And then as I began to get older, I started to realize that it's actually far easier to not get into a position where you have to lie in the first place than it is to tell a lie and then have to do all of the stuff necessary to sustain the lie. So for me, it's just not worth it, and it's very draining when I have to do it. The sovereign lives and breathes lies, and I don't know where she finds the energy. Like, that it's really as simple as that. And I know it sounds like I'm sort of making light of this, but I really mean it. Like, being this sort of person who murders someone's family, frames another person for it, and then you pretend to their face that not only are you not responsible for that, but that they are a beloved family member, practically, that you consider them as one of your own children, nearly. That is something that is beyond belief in terms of what I imagine the kind of energy it would take to keep that going. And I really, the whole society functions like this in a lot of ways. And I just can't imagine being forced to live like this. And what's funny is, like, that's not even rare. You know, this isn't even, there are so many people whose whole families sort of operate this way. That you can have all kinds of horrific drama going on within your family, and yet you get together at Thanksgiving and you all just pretend that didn't happen, or actively pretend it's not happening when it is, you know? And so everybody is always sort of lying and keeping face. And I'm just so grateful that the way I was raised, I was not in a family where that felt necessary. It was because I was sort of like isolated with just my mother, my grandmother, and my dad. If I had been more in contact with, like, aunts and uncles than I was, it may have raised its head, and I may have, like, seen some of that firsthand. But, you know, my father's family, there's the language barrier. My mother's family, they all moved away. And so a lot of that I was just really spared from. And I think that's part of why, to this day, I have so little tolerance for passive aggressiveness, because it has never been necessary in my life, which is kind of like a privilege, honestly, that I have been able to be mostly honest about myself and what I think, and a lot of folks just don't get to do that. So I just really feel for you if you are in a family where you have to, like, pretend to be a different person, or where you have to hide a lot of who you are. You know, that's just got to be, like, extremely tiring. So this scene, I love when the sovereign says, "Did they hang you?" And he says, "They tried. It didn't quite take." And I don't know if she knows what happened with Sevro. I feel like he's making it sort of sound like, oh, they just couldn't kill me. And I was like, does she know how that, you know? And then She says, "You remind me of Lorne when he was young." I know she once said to Virginia that she reminded her of herself. The affection is more real than the Jackal has for his men, but she's still a collector, still using love and loyalty as a shield to protect herself. So they have all of this, like, you know, kind of back and forth here about what it is he's planning. Do we know enough? And Mustang being like, Cassius, don't tell her anything, yada, yada, yada. And the attack, the Sovereign is mad because the Jackal didn't mention it to her. And she's just like, oh, you were just more concerned with chopping his hand off, which he had made it sound earlier like that was her order. But now I'm like, was it? Or did he just want... And considering the way these chapters end with him laughing in their faces, I'm a little concerned that there was like something very particular that he needed to get Darrow's hand off, you know? So the Jackal says if he has a team coming, it'll be Valaris and Julii. They're his best weapons. Valaris is the Obsidian, yes? Queen of the Obsidian, Mustang says. You should meet her. You'd remind Sephi of her mother. I love that she doesn't know what all that was implying. So the conversation, I'm just going to kind of go through this a little bit more quickly because a lot of it is Mustang trying to frighten the Sovereign, talking about how all of the Obsidian are united, about how much more terrifying Sephi is than even her brother, about how there's going to be all of these like Obsidian heading their way that are, I think she says like 10,000. Yeah, 10,000. Didn't you know? And they don't doubt her for a moment, which I kind of was surprised by. It felt for me, the way she said it, didn't you know? It really felt like a taunt in a way that undermined its veracity, you know? And they don't seem to really like even think about the fact that she's just lying to them. I don't know. So Aja stays, and the Sovereign sends pretty much all of her other Olympic Knights away to deal with this problem. Yeah, here it is. The legatus and the remaining Praetorians rush out, leaving the room deserted, save for Cassius. The 3 Olympic Knights... Oh, she doesn't send them away. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Antonia, the Jackal, the Sovereign, 3 Praetorian guards, and us prisoners. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, we're setting this up. Okay, we needed to get as many people out of here as possible. Severus Julii come forward. Antonia does, surprised to have been singled out. A hopeful smile works its way onto her lips. No doubt she's to receive a commendation for her efforts today. She clasps both hands behind her back and waits before her Sovereign. I didn't even think of this, but what it turns out is actually happening. Antonia really thinks that she knows. But it turns out that the fact that she bailed to save her own hide had not gone unnoticed. And the first thing that is asked of her is basically, weren't you there? And because she was really expecting to be praised and get a little pat on the back, but it's going this way, she's wrong-footed and doesn't know how to respond and is just like, well, wait, I'm confused. And I'm immediately like, ma'am, if they hadn't just sealed that door, I would be advising you to run right now. Like, this definitely got me paranoid. And instantly I realized, oh, right, that whole thing, they're about to nail her to the wall for this. It does not seem that has even occurred to her. So I was just delighted because y'all know Antonia, like, she is absolutely terrifying to me. She really is. And the fact that she, like, seems to really believe that she gets a commendation for being captured, like, it's like she's trying to take credit for Cassius capturing them, as if she had anything to do with it. Bitch, you didn't orchestrate this. You weren't part of... He did this and then just let you out after he had managed to get into an advantageous position, and you were just there. You just happened to be there in the background. This has nothing to do with your abilities. So I did find it really, really funny that she just thought the fact that she ran was going to go under the radar. But yeah, evidently she starts this whole, like, you know, argument about, oh, this is what really happened. And they're like, yeah, okay. I love this. The Sovereign says it was a noble thing saving so many. And she starts to say thank. And she says, at least it would be if it were true. I beg your pardon. I don't believe I have ever stuttered, girl. I do, however, believe you fled the battle, abandoning your post and your imperator to the enemy. You are calling me a liar, my liege? Obviously, Mustang says. I will not stand aspersions against my honor, Antonia snaps at Mustang, puffing up her chest. It is beneath... Oh, be still, child. You're in deep waters here, with larger fish than you. You see, others escaped the battle, others who transmitted their battle analytics to us, so we would know what happened. So we could assess the calamity and see how Antonia of the Severus Julii disgraced her name and lost us the battle, abandoning her praetor when he called for aid, fleeing for the belt to save her own hide, where she then lost her ships. And she says that shit was rogue, he lost it, but Aja says because his allies abandoned him. He might still have saved his command had you not thrown his formation into chaos. I don't know if that's true. They were, like, on the bridge. And I know that Darrow had to sort of, like, do this whole thing where he pretended that he wasn't at the bridge yet. So maybe they are sort of buying into part of that, and that he, you know, there was still a chance that we could have gotten, but I don't know, y'all. It was unclear to me whether this was just sort of them throwing a thing in her face just to shame her, or if this were really like a genuine alternate option that it could have gone that way. And she does a whole, like, you know, you've manufactured evidence. Adrius, tell them how ridiculous this is. And he doesn't answer. And then eventually when she says Adrius again, he says, I'd rather have the loyalty of a dog than that of a coward. Lilith was right. You are weak. And that is dangerous. And it's the thing that Antonia realizes, like, it's over for me. Him pulling away from her and the way he says all of this. And I know that this is super unimportant, you guys, but I desperately want to know what Lilith said and how she said it. You know, he's saying, like, she was right, you're weak and dangerous. Fine. But I want to hear the exact words that she said. Lilith is such a closed book for me. You know, she really hasn't, she's been sort of this specter in the background that hasn't really been, her personality is just not something that I have gotten a chance to know. And just the idea of her basically, like, gossiping about Antonia to Adrius, and is there a tone to it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is she gossiping because she really is worried about who Antonia is and the damage that she could do? Or is she jealous? Does she have a thing for him? And she's just sort of like, let me get in there and plant some seeds of doubt. I just don't really know anything about what she wants. And so judging what her motivations were is just beyond me at this point. But yeah, I really would love to hear a little tea pouring session between the two of them and see how that goes. So eventually, we have her being beheaded. She shivers in horror, shrinking to her knees, not even attempting to fight, as the huge woman slowly closes her hands and begins to strangle her to death. Oh my God. I don't know why I said that she was beheaded, because no, it's the strangling and then the neck snap. I think that's what it was, that I remember it happening to her neck and I was thinking of it as a beheading, but yeah, that's it. Oh God. So that's the end of chapter 60. Then we go into 61. Remove his muzzle, she tells Aja. Imagine a world without the arrogance of the young, Octavia says to her fury. Imagine a world without the greed of the old, I reply hoarsely. Aja slams the side of my head with her fist. Why'd you take off his muzzle if you wanted him to be silent? Mustang asks. The jackal laughs. A fair point, Octavia. Octavia scowls at him. Because we executed a puppet last time and the world knows it. This is flesh and blood, the red who rose. I want them to know it is he who falls. I want them to know that even their best is insignificant. Which is kind of funny because he is, even if you kill him, absolutely not insignificant. Like, sweetie, angel, baby, I know what you want them to think, but it's too late for that. You got a whole ass revolution on your hands. You have many victories or many defeats. It's I don't know at this point if they kill Darrow, if that's the end of things. I genuinely am not sure that would be how it went. But also, I do want to mention, the fact that the jackal is sort of, talking to her in this very familiar way. It was sort of making me go, they have a much different relationship than I was expecting, because Octavia just doesn't seem to have friends or peers, and he's behaving like they are peers. And I was sort of thinking I guess if she is aware that he has these nukes that he's been smuggling, which, Cassius, I believe his information was quite good, then maybe she's just letting him get away with stuff because he knows because he has that in his back pocket and she just doesn't want to push him. But it really did feel like he was taking more liberties than we have seen anybody else. So let's see. Say goodbye to the red Mustang, Aja says, patting Mustang's head. Can't even do it yourself? I asked the jackal. What a man you are. He frowns. I want to do it, Octavia, the jackal says suddenly, rising from his seat and walking out to the holodeck. And Aja tries to be like, that is not your job. And he's like, was I fucking talking to you? And she does not like it. But Octavia kind of stops her and says, let him do it. And that was another one. It mentions the sovereign's deference to the jackal is strange. It's out of character, but in keeping with the oddness I felt between them. And yeah, the whole vibe here with him laughing at the end, it just feels like, thank you for doing the work for me. I have been trying to figure out a way that I could step into her shoes and take her out, and nothing presented itself. And here you are leveling her. Now I can step in, appreciate it. And I don't like it. So let's see. He's no gold, the jackal explains. He doesn't deserve a razor or a state death. He'll go like his uncle. In any matter, I very much would like to begin the transition as the hand of justice. Plus, offing Darrow with Sevro's gun is more poetic, don't you think, Octavia? Very well. Is there anything else you would like? The sovereign asks he takes the pistol, and then we have Octavia making her big speech about how the bad, bad people have been taking what's ours and stealing our birthright, and we are meant to lead, and yada, yada, yada. The usual. It's a very long speech. This is the sort of thing that I'm like, I can't decide whether I like it because it's true to character, because I do believe that she would approach all of this way with as much grandiose pomposity. Is that a word? I feel like it is. I'm just going to go with it. But, she's got him where she wants him, and it really doesn't get more, significant than moments like this. So I'm not really faulting her for that, because you have got to make this into an event. But I think it's just that so much of these books toward the end become big speeches that I start to just get a little bit numbed to it. And I'm like, can we just get through this, please? And get to the thing that we're, so Jarrow of Lycos, by the power entrusted me by the compact, I find you guilty, da-da-da-da-da. I find you guilty of treason against your society. Let that be for Roke, let that be for the Golds. Give me something more, something they cannot understand. Give me the rage of my people, the wrath of all people in bondage. I howl for my wife, for my father, for Ragnar and Quinn and Pax and Neril. For all the people I've lost, for all they would take. I howl because I am a Helldiver of Lycos. I am the Reaper of Mars, and I have paid for access to this bunker with my flesh, all so I could come before Octavia, all so that I might either die with my friends or see our enemies brought to justice. The Sovereign nods to the jackal to execute the sentence. He presses the barrel to the back of my head and squeezes the trigger. The gun kicks in his hand. Fire spits, scorching my scalp, deafening sound ringing through my right ear. But I do not fall. No bullet carves through my head. Smoke swirls out of the barrel, and as the jackal looks down at the gun, he knows. No. He steps away from me, dropping the gun, trying to pull out his razor. Octavia, Aja shouts, lunging forward. But just then, in that beat of the heart, the Sovereign hears something behind the camera and turns to see a Praetorian guard with his head tilted, his pulse rifle thumping to the floor as a grisly red tongue protrudes from his mouth. Only it's not a tongue. It's Cassius' bloody razor that entered through the back of the Praetorian's skull and out between his teeth. That is an image. Cassius stands behind the slaughtered men, his head lowered, his razor red, his left hand holding the remote control to my restraints and Mustang's. And the Sovereign really seems absolutely fucking shocked. She had no idea. The whole vibe here is just like a real, genuine panic. Probably some of the realest emotion that we have ever gotten to see from her. Even when Darrow catches her lying in that little weird game she had with those creatures, she barely shows a flicker when she lies, and otherwise manages to still kind of keep this mask on. This is a kind of fear or uncertainty we've never gotten from her before. I jam the blade through her black jacket into the softness of her lower belly. She gasps, eyes huge, inches from mine. I smell the coffee on her breath. There was something about that very specific detail that made it suddenly feel real in a way I wouldn't expect a single detail to be able to do. And that's like the kind of thing I'm going to put that in my pocket and remember it for any scene in the future where I really need to make something seem immediate and familiar. I was very, very uncomfortable. It's one thing to be killing, and it's another thing for it to be like, this isn't just a symbol of everything terrible. This is a person who just had coffee a little bit earlier, and it was just like, they took a shower and they just did human things. And something about that makes it really sad in a different way. So the jackal gets his razor out and he starts slashing at Darrow. Meanwhile, Aja is coming at him, and there is just a lot going on here. Aja is so scary. She is just, I'm so mad that she survived that whole thing. I'm so mad that that she's still here, that Octavia didn't send her off. Like, it makes sense, of course, but, you guys, the Joy Knight's back is to me. He feels me coming, but it's too late. Silently, I jump through the air and swing a huge, looping strike down at him from behind. Left arm slowing as it meets the throbbing resistance of the pulse shield centimeters from the armor, then jerking as it cleaves into his sky blue plate and through muscle and bone, carrying from left shoulder to the right pelvis, parting his body at a diagonal. His body drips to the ground. Wow. So, this is Cassius. How was my acting? And I just wanted to be like, quite good. You took his hand off very convincingly. We turn together to face the deadliest human being in the solar system. She's crouched over a terribly wounded Octavia who has crawled to the edge of the holodeck and pants on her back, holding her stomach together with both hands. And Aja is crying, as is Lysander, her grandson who is here. What a shame. Aja, I had almost wondered, and I don't know if this is me like reading too much into this, but guys, are Aja and the Sovereign a couple? Like, there is something about the emotion between the two of them that felt like more than just a ruler and their trusted personal bodyguard. It was like a real grief. I don't know. I maybe just, it may just be that, but it felt so raw in a way I really wasn't expecting. So she stands up and is obviously just like, all right, I'm going to fucking take you guys down. I am going to fuck you up. I'm going to fuck you up so hard that everybody on your side is going to feel it. And this bitch fights so well that all of them coming at her isn't enough almost. Like, it's so impressive and it makes me very, very sad that she's this good. It's got me on the edge of my seat in a way, but also I know that our friends are going to win, but I don't know that they're all going to be alive at the end of it. So I started to genuinely get nervous. Like, I'm feeling that we have a victory in our hands, but what kind of victory? Because she is so fast and can seem to predict what they're going to do as if she's reading their minds. And there's this moment where he gets the weapon knocked out of his hand, and then it's just shit, I hiss, scrambling towards the Praetorians to pick up one of their razors. I gain a pulse rifle and fire blindly behind me. Aja's pulse shield absorbs the munitions, throbbing crimson as she sprints at me and slashes the weapon from my hand. I escape again, rolling backward, taking a long burning gash on the back of my hamstrings, but gaining a razor as I jump out of the holodeck ring up to the sitting level several feet below. I love this, like the fact that he is literally scrambling. He's fleeing and desperately trying to get weapons up, and he's like almost not able to do it. It's just, like, he's very good, but she is just so far beyond what any of them can do. We're not going to put her down, I realize. This was our fear. Losing my hand was never part of the plan either. One by one, she's going to kill us. I have a brief moment of hope when Mustang and Cassius finally pin Aja between them. I jump down to help the assault. The woman pivots and twirls like a willow caught among 3 tornadoes. She knows her armor will take our glancing blows, but our skin can't take hers. She goes for shallow cuts, bleeding us out methodically, aiming for the tendons in our knees, arms like Lorne taught us both, a sage digging the roots. So, I'm going to jump a little bit further out, and she is about to go for Darrow, and Mustang yells, "Do not touch him." "How could you choose him over us?" Aja shouts in rage to Mustang and Cassius. "Easily," Mustang replies. Cassius pulls the syringe from the holster on his leg and tosses it across the room to me. "Do it before she kills us, man." I stumble to my feet as Aja tries furiously to get at me, but Cassius and Mustang have strength enough to batter her away. And once he gets this syringe, I was just like, oh my God, he's still alive. He's still alive. Like, I was pretty sure all of this meant that Sevro was still alive. But the fact that they go into this fight and they fight for so long and there's no mention, I was starting to think, like, because my assumption had been that he was going to simply wake up, that this thing would wear off. But that is not how it works, evidently. So yeah, he jams it into Sevro's chest. "Wakey, wakey, goblin," I say, as I lift high the syringe, praying the silent prayer that his heart doesn't fail. His eyes burst open. Fuck. Exploding upward out of the coma induced by the hemanthus oil in the flask he was drinking from before we freed Cassius, he flails past me, gaining his feet, looking around with manic, wild eyes, hands vibrating. "You're bleeding! Darrow, you're bleeding!" "I know." "Where's your hand? You're missing a fucking hand!" "I know." I loved it so much. He says, "I'm going to kill you, Aja. I'm going to kill you in your face." Oh my God, I'm going to kill you right in the face. So, on the run, Sevro scoops up a pulse fist from a dead Praetorian and tramples over the jackal's body, stomping on his face as he grabs the razor that pins the young archgovernor to the ground. I really can't get enough of this fucking guy. He just... I don't even know how, like, purposeful this is. But I really think it has to be. I really think he's like, oh, there's his face. I'll time this. I need to make sure I step on it. Like, it has, right? It has to be. Ugh. I join the fray as Aja gains separation, stumbling back from us. But on the ground behind her, she leaves something few humans have seen. A thin ribbon of blood. "Well, look at that. You do bleed. Let's see how much more you got in there." "Shut up," Aja says, lashing out at him. But Sevro dances back, and Cassius and I dart forward, stabbing at her. She parries Cassius' thrust at her neck and his 2 successive moves, but not in time to counter me. I feign a thrust at her abdomen and slash her shin instead, raking through the metal. Metal parts, and blood coats my blade. Mustang stabs her calf. I dart back as she wheels on me, making her overextend so Sevro can strike again. He does, furiously slashing the Achilles tendon on her right leg. You guys, I had just said in a previous episode that I can't stand Achilles tendon shit, and then it happened like right here, and I was like, oh, come on. "You're gonna die," he says with an evil little hiss. "You're gonna die." "Shut up." "That one's for Quinn," he hisses as Cassius cuts through the tendon of her left knee. "This one's for Ragnar." I impale her right thigh with an underhanded thrust. "This one's for Mars." Mustang takes her arm off at the elbow. Aja looks down at the appendage on the ground as if wondering if it belongs to her. But she's given no respite. Sevro tosses aside his pulse fist, picks the Truth Knight's razor from the ground, and jumps in the air to bring both his swords down into her chest, hanging there a foot off the ground. Their faces inches from one another, noses nearly touching, as Aja sinks to her knees, setting Sevro back on his feet. Omnis vir lupus. What does that mean, you guys? I want to say that it's like the wolf sees everything, but that's purely like me just going off of what I know of like Spanish and trying to apply that to Latin. He kisses her nose and jerks his razors out of her chest, letting them slither back into whips around his forearms. Oh, Cassie says it's every man is a wolf, or every man a wolf. Oh, that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. Instead of it being like, oh, we're wolves and you're sheep. Every man a wolf. It's inclusive and it's not like arrogant. I like it. So Aja apologizes to Octavia and says, time itself will remember you. Nah, probably not, Sevro says pitilessly. Nighty-night, Grimace. He lops off her head and kicks her in the chest. Her body teeters back and collapses to the floor, where he jumps atop it on all fours and howls. You guys, this is reminding... I don't know how popular this movie was, so I don't know if anybody here will have seen it. But there was a movie with, I think it was Reese Witherspoon and Kiefer Sutherland, called Highway. If you haven't seen it, it's really something. It's one of those heightened sort of like genre movies that you've got to adjust to this weird world a little bit. Not that it's our world, but it's so stylized. And there is a point where somebody is killed by being knocked down and people just jumping on them gleefully over and over again. And it's somebody who is really awful, but the like horror of everybody jumping up and down on their body like they're a fucking twin bed is really visceral. And this just reminded me of that so much. So Lysander tries to stop them from killing Octavia. He's crying, and it's all very much like, we don't want to kill you, kid, but also, ultimately, we may have to anyway. Like, none of them really want to face that here, which I don't blame them, you know? But it is an unfortunate reality that there's a reason people take out entire families, including the children. And I just feel so bad that Lysander is like, that this is the position that they're in, that he was here and saw it all, and the trauma of all of this, plus him being, it seems like a pretty decent kid, but that's really hard to know. I don't know. So this is when Octavia says to Cassius, why? And he says, because you lied. And this is when he takes... It is called a hollow cube. Okay. The scene of Cassius' family dying plays, bathing her in blue light. Shadows move through a hall, becoming men in scarab skin. They cut down his aunt in a hallway, and the men move through and appear a moment later dragging children, which they kill with the razors and boots. More bodies are dragged and piled up, then lit on fire so there would be no survivors. More than 40 children and non-scarred family members died that night. They thought they could heap the sin upon the shoulders of a fallen man, but it was the jackal's work. He finished the war between the Bologna and the Augustuses, and the sovereign's cooperation and silence was his price for my triumph. You ask me why? Cassius' voice is barely above a whisper. It is because you are without honor. I swore an oath as an Olympic knight to honor the compact, to bring justice to the society of man. You swore the same, Octavia, but you forgot what that meant. Everyone has. That is why this world is broken. Maybe the next one can be better. This world is the best we can afford, Octavia whispers. Do you really believe that? Mustang asks. With all my heart. Then I pity you, Mustang says. And so does Cassius. My heart was my brother, and I no longer believe in a world that says he was too weak to deserve life. He would have believed in this, in the hope of something new. For Julian, I can believe in that too. Cassius hands me the other 2 hollow cubes from his pouch. The first is the murder of my friends at my triumph. The second is for the rim. When they see this recording, they will know I have struck a blow for them. Politics never rests. I set the 2 hollow cubes in the sovereign's hands to join the first. Rhea glows before her, a blue and white moon, gorgeous beside its brothers Iapetus, I hope I'm saying that right, and Titan, as they orbit giant Saturn. Then, over the moon's north pole, tiny slivers, which you'd hardly notice, flicker several innocent times, and mushrooms of fire bloom upon the surface of the blue and white planet. Mustang moves aside so I can crouch before the dying woman, speaking softly, so she will know that justice, not vengeance, has found her in the end. My people have a legend of a being who stands astride the road leading to the world after. He will judge the wicked from the good. His name is the Reaper. I am not him. I am just a man, but soon you will meet him. Soon he will judge you for all the sins you hold. And she says, these are sacrifices that are necessary, and you'll be the same. And he says, basically, the fuck I will. And she just continues to, defend this idea, which makes sense because she's dedicated her whole life to this, and I don't know if she started off believing this. I'm not sure if it was a sincere belief, but it's something that she has had to cling to, so I could see talking yourself into believing it because it gives you what you want in the end, you know? Someone must rule, or 1,000 years from now, children will ask, who broke the worlds? Who put the light out? And their parents will say it was you. But I already know this. I knew this when I asked Sevro if he knew how this would end. I will not replace tyranny with chaos. There must be order, even if it is a compromise. But I don't tell her that. And then she says, you must stop him. You must stop Adrius. And those are the last words as she dies. And then the jackal is laughing, and I'm just like, part of me is like, did he know this plan was in, did he have a suspicion? And because it suited him, he just decided to go ahead and let him do it? You know, I don't think so. I don't want that to be true just because I don't really like the trope of the bad guy being 20 steps ahead of everybody. So I would prefer that not be what's happening here. But for the record, if it were, it would make sense, and I wouldn't hate it. I just kind of, that can be a little bit tired at this point. What it makes me think of is the other trope that was in every movie for a while, which is, oh, they captured the villain, but it's because the villain wanted to be captured. He's in the prison because that's where he needed to be. And they've done just what he wanted. You know what I mean? So I just kind of have mixed feelings about that being how this turned out. But it may just be that the shock that he showed when he pulled the trigger and it didn't kill Darrow, I can't help but think that was genuine. It felt real. I don't know. I may be giving him too much credit here. But, yeah, so that is the end of the chapters. And we just have a couple more and 3 more and then an epilogue. So I guess we're going to have to see where we are. There's a lot going on, guys. All right. I am going to wrap this up. Thank you very much to Cassie for commissioning this one. Appreciate you. And I hope you guys have been enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.